Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. This is take 3 because I'm relatively sure the heat is melting our equipment. Who knows? Greg, as always, is joining me today, the usual host of our podcast. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, it's hot, mate. I'm melting with the equipment. It's hot, probably too hot. Just not built to deal with it.
It is too hot to do anything. However, as we Brits love to talk about the weather all the time, how about we talk about something more interesting like football?
Yes, let's do it. I'm excited. I'll tell you one person before we start, Zach, who is definitely struggling with the heat. I don't know if you saw the video of the first day back in training yesterday, but my man Will Steele is.
My man needs some sun cream, bro. he needs some sun cream. Whichever, whoever wants to sponsor us for that would be for sure. We will have an official sunscreen partner for Southampton FC. To be fair, we have an official partner for basically everything else.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I respect it because it was definitely too hot to be out, especially to do football training yesterday.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I was out at a theme park and that was a struggle enough. But yeah, I really enjoyed it was only like a minute long video, but just progressively watching him glow more and more.
Walks back in and it's sort of radioactive a little bit. Yeah, I get you. Well, we aren't talking about him today, but we are talking about one of the members of his new backroom staff. So recently it was announced we had our full sort of list of backroom staff, and a new name on that list was Ruben Martinez, who we didn't really know a huge amount, but obviously when we talked about it initially, Greg said he's been at a lot of clubs and it looks like he's got a wealth of experience. So I thought, how much experience does he have? So I decided to look it up. And Greg, let me tell you, this was a difficult one to research because unlike usually where there's like pretty normal sort of, you can find a profile of someone quite easily, it's very much not as much information on this guy. Also, I think that Ruben's Martinez is very similar to like John Smith in Spain. So
just
there's a bunch of different
name.
Yeah. So it's been having to make sure the information is correct. Like there isn't even like a base source. There isn't even like an easy source like a Wikipedia, right? There is a German Wikipedia entry for him that kind of like dies after about halfway through his career. So this has been a lot of piecemeal from a lot of bit of information. I've tried to make sure it's as accurate as possible. So yeah, we'll just crack on, shall we?
Let's do it. I can't wait.
Wonderful. So Ruben Martinez was born on the 4th of March, 1977, and began his career in Barca's youth system. So he is a Barcelona alumni. He played in the C team before making his debut in the B team in 1996. His position, as obviously he would go later on to coach, is goalkeeper. So that's where he was playing. After he made his debut in the B team, the end of that season, Barca B were relegated. But he did stay with them until they were back up in 1998, where he moved to 3rd Division Leonesa. During that time, he made 21 appearances over a 2-year stint, which isn't a lot. But then obviously, we know how goalkeepers are, right? Like, if you are not the first choice goalkeeper, you don't
get game time.
You just don't get games. It'll be, maybe a few cups here and there. So then he moved to FC Zamora for the 2000-2001 season. After a season there, he then moved to Novelda CF, where he went on to make 61 appearances over 2 seasons. So, he's starting to increase now as more of sort of having a few more appearances over time and feeling like he's either not going to quite say first team, but maybe, sort of 31 over a season. How many games? Couple of games missed here and there. So then so spent 2 seasons there before moving to Hercules Alicante in 2003. Once again, spent 2 seasons there, making 68 appearances before his final playing move to FC Badalona in 2005. So this is the club he stayed at for a vast majority of his career, right? He stayed there for 5 years before eventually retiring from playing in 2010 after making a total of 154 appearances for them. So it sounds like he was, solidly their goalkeeper, found his home of where he eventually wanted to be. And then, Greg, he joined Oscar Garcia as a goalkeeping coach for the Barcelona's under-19s team. And I think I said in a take before, probably not this take, but you're going to learn more about Oscar Garcia today, Greg, whether you liked it or not, because it turns out, unfortunately, their careers are very, very intertangled. And it's a weird one. He's definitely was a core member of his backstaff until probably the last sort of 2-3 years. So the sort of history we're getting is going to be of both Ruben Martinez and Oscar Garcia.
All right, now I am not good with names or remembering things, but is that the manager that Will Still took over from the first time Will Still was a manager?
Now, Greg, you've come to that's a bit of a spoiler from the future, but yes, it is a ships passing in the wind situation. I'll get to it in a bit later, because some sources say that he worked under Will Still, but a lot of the other sources I've said have him leaving alongside Garcia when Garcia was let go. So, but yes, he did. There's going to be a couple of situations like that, which are going to make me wonder what Martinez's contribution is and what my feelings are. But we'll get proper into the meat and the bones of his actual coaching career after a word from our partners at Bionique.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionique, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionique provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimize your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionique. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
Rightio. So we are back and we are ready to dive into the coaching career of Ruben Martinez. So he went back to his roots after leaving his long time playing club of Badalona, and went to become the goalkeeping coach of Barcelona's under-19s team alongside Oscar Garcia. He was there alongside Garcia from July 2010 to June 2012, leaving alongside his boss, filming the first but not the last time that he would move with him. So this is where I think you mentioned this at least once, Greg, where he moved to Maccabi Tel Aviv. So this was his first sort of stint there. And he moved initially as a goalkeeping coach during the one season that Garcia was in charge there. And they won the league. So they did all right.
Although, do they not win the league every year? It's a name I know, right? So
yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where, like, we're going to get to a few clubs that are managed by Garcia that is kind of an expectation, and by a few, for some it works out, and for some it doesn't when he's in charge. But yeah, because of this, obviously his success, he ended up then going next season to replace Paulo Sousa at Brighton. So he actually has got championship experience as well. We're going to see the extent of, but he was a goalkeeping coach during this time. They managed to finish 6th that season. So that was the season of 2013 to 2014. This is when Brighton were unable to get promoted and they lost 6-2 on aggregate in the playoffs to Derby. So obviously Garcia left the club. And a pattern that we will see emerge throughout the rest of my notes is that Martinez left with him, where they returned, Greg, very, very briefly for 2 months, and I'd have loved to have known the circumstances around this, to Maccabi Tel Aviv. So they went back to Maccabi Tel Aviv for a very short period from July to August in 2014, which is weird, right? Because then they were announced as... Garcia was announced as Watford's manager, and Martinez became one of his assistant managers. So this now transitions his jump from goalkeeping coach into just like genuine assistant manager for the, clubs that he will be under Garcia with. So there was a bit of a problem. So I don't know if you remember that season for Watford. So this was the season that Watford got promoted. They finished 2nd in the league. Troy Deeney was their top goal scorer. So it's like prime what we remember Watford to be before they just became known for firing their managers. So 1 month into, not even a month into his tenure at Watford, Garcia got sick. So for about 2 weeks, Martinez, and I want to say became joint head coach alongside Javier Piera, right? So they took over for a little bit while Garcia was sick. And then Garcia left due to illness, which was a bit like, oh, that's a bit kind of crazy. However, Martinez stayed a part of this coaching setup, working under new manager Slavica Djukanovic, under the season that Watford, obviously, as I said, won automatic promotion in the second place. You'd expect, promotion to the Premier League, he'd probably stay. He didn't. He helped get Watford promoted and then left to return to his old boss, Garcia, as an assistant manager at RB Salzburg in Austria at the end of December 2015. So, yeah, he just kind of left Watford and then immediately went to rejoin his old friend to take his new venture in Austria. Obviously, probably know a little bit about Salzburg, right, Greg? Obviously, I think Mane was from there. They are part of the Red Bull setup. They are usually champions in Austria, and this didn't have much of a difference here. So I've got some weird Saints links. So the season they took over, Salzburg, in the team was former loanee Takumi Minamino, previously the Japanese international from Liverpool, and also Jaleta Carr, who weirdly appears in a few of all the people. He's one of the ones that for some reason consistently, like ships in the night, we constantly pass Jaleta Carr whenever we do these for some reason, which I guess says more about how many clubs he's been at than anything else.
Yeah. He's like the Peter Crouch of centre-backs in the modern era, right?
Yeah.
Played for everyone.
solidly now part of that Lyon setup, I think.
Yeah.
But they finished the season as winners, which was really good. Kind of an expectation. They're a strong Austrian side. And then they stayed for the 2016-2017 season, where they won the league and Austrian Cup again. And during that time, and I don't know if this is his goalkeeper coach or the fact that there was other bits and pieces, they conceded the lowest goals in Austrian Bundesliga history with 24. And Garcia massively criticised the Red Bull sort of setup because this was when the multi-club model really took off. And a lot of the key Salzburg players then went over to Leipzig. So all of the sort of big players that that went to Leipzig were transferred from Salzburg. So they basically lost everybody. And they kind of built a strike force around current Wolves striker Wang Hee-chan and managed to kind of do really well, which kind of shows some level of managerial pedigree, right? To deal with a situation where you've been entirely pilfered and still retain, and not only that, do probably the best you've ever done. So that was sort of interesting. I don't really know why he left. I don't know if it was the end of the contract or what, but it seemed really surprising that he would go after such a level of success. So I don't know if it was a 2-year contract or, but either way, they ended up joining the French team Saint-Anton in 2017. And that meant that Martinez went with him. So as you're starting to notice now, Greg, it's a profile of the two of them because wherever Garcia goes, Martinez is his assistant manager. So unfortunately, for better or worse, it does also mean that their careers are intrinsically tied, right? The results of his manager are going to be tied to him as the assistant, which I think you probably get away with a bit more if you were just the goalkeeper coach, but he was the assistant. So that time in France, Greg, was incredibly short because they only lasted until November. They resigned after they were beaten by rival Olympiacos Lyon, who we've just discussed. They were beaten 5-0. And as they're like a rival, it would be like, could you imagine if we lost to Pompey 5-0 on the fourth day of the season and Will still was still in charge the next
day? Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of the end for them, but they didn't end up employed for long because then in January 2018, they took over Olympiacos in Greece. So now you're starting to see where all of these so now we've been to France, we've been to Austria, we've been to the Championship twice. We've been to Israel, we've been to loads of
well-travelled experience.
Yeah, and it seems that there seems to be a real big mix of success and also doing absolutely terrible. And what we're going to start to get as well is maybe a season that's good and then sort of fired at the beginning of the season. Which, again, this is more of a reflection of Garcia. Martinez is just there. I'd like to think that Martinez has kind of helped the good parts of it. especially things like the defensive record at Salzburg, I think is hugely important to bear in mind, because you wouldn't do that unless you had a good shot stopper as well. So, yeah. This, however, Greg, was another short spell, and they were gone by early April. Olympiacos finished third that season, which was the first time in 7 years they weren't champion. They bowed out of the Greek Cup and the Champions League, and it was the first time they hadn't won anything since 2010. So, obviously, that's one of probably the few Greek teams you are aware of, right? So
I know at least them and AEK Athens.
Yeah, you're right. You're thinking of the ones that were available on FIFA in the rest of the world category.
Don't know what you mean, mate. What do you mean?
So yeah, that was kind of, after that, there was a bit of a bigger gap of unemployment, right? So this was 2018. And now we're headed into 2019, where he joined Garcia in a new venture at Celta Vigo in Spain, which, yeah, it was a really tough season for them. They managed to, their first season in charge, where they took over in November, they managed to keep Vigo up by only 1 point, narrowly preventing relegation, okay? And I found more strenuous sort of Saints links, because these again, it's very candle in the wind with Saints players and Saints managers. They joined Vigo after the season that both Buffal and Wesley Hoyt were on loan there. If you remember, we sent them both on loan at the same season. We were just shipping off all the players to loan again. So yeah, just after that season. And then obviously we go in. They go into the second season, and this is something we're going to see again. But we'll talk about that after a word from our partners at Zencastr.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
And we are back. So, when I left off, Celta Vigo managed to stay up 1 point. Happy days, right? Not really, in my opinion. Probably expect to do better. And in the beginning,
I don't know if the context, right? Staying up by 1 point to some teams is a huge win. Staying up,
I think that there was
Man United is a disaster, right? So
they performed under expectations, right? They weren't expected to sort of I think they weren't expected to be down that low. And I think the next season, after Garcia has left, spoiler, they won promotion. All this time, by the way, Martinez is the assistant manager. I think he would technically, at Celta Vigo, whilst as the assistant manager, was also maybe the chief analyst. So I think he's like,
okay.
Do you know what I mean? Because obviously sometimes what you actually have is assistant manager, and then other places it's like workplaces, it's deputy manager, and other places it's like joint coach. They're all meaning kind of the same things. It really depends on the setup. It's like how we were talking about how Spors is head of global operations or whatever, but also kind of not. He's kind of basically just in charge of Southampton. Very, very sort of similar vibes. It depends on what's going on. But again, as the spoiler of the fact that he leaves, Greg, is because he was gone in November 2020 after only winning one of their first 9 games. Which, you know, imagine a manager only winning one of their first 9 games and immediately getting let go in this day and age, Greg. Eh?
If only.
Nowadays, you get at least 30 games before they get rid of you, because stability is the most important thing. We jest, obviously. So he was unemployed again, and in a pattern that quite often repeats itself, Garcia became head coach, and he was joined by Martinez as assistant manager, this time at Stade Reims, who are another link to Southampton, with that being one of Will Still's clubs, as you alluded to, Greg. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, their first season, they finished 12th. Not too bad. Fine. I don't think you hugely expect to do great in a league that has like PSG and Lyon and other kind of teams like that. But also, this is the second time they've been in France. So we're really getting about now, right? We've been to Spain, we've been to Greece, we've been to France, we've been to Austria, we've been to England twice, specifically the Championship. We've been to Israel. We've been proper knocking around. At this point, we've built up a wealth of experience. However, we are part of the backroom staff of a manager who seems to do all right his first season. The second season seems to be the killer. Or in some cases, it's just, he ends up in charge of like Salzburg, where it's there's an expectation you'd win. But also, I very much think that's why they brought him into Olympiacos, right? As there's an expectation. And at this point, Martinez is very intrinsically tied to Garcia because everything he's doing. That is going to change, by the way. Not for a huge amount of time, but it will change. However, for the time being, we're still talking about his time at Reims. So their second season started again, and a similar story occurred, Greg, where they had 1 win in 10, which meant that he was replaced by Will Still in October 2022. And that was the season that Will Still took charge, made a name for himself by, sort of having that massive unbeaten run. That was around the time, I think, with all the coaching, football manager nonsense that we've seen before, which, we're already starting to understand is not the entire be-all and end-all of his career. And this now marks the split from where him and Garcia moved on from one another. I don't know if it was an unhappy end to the relationship or they just decided to part the course. I'm not really too sure. But either way, this is how it ended up. Garcia continued his pattern of a good first season and poor second, but in another club he went on. I can't remember where he went to after that, but he did the very similar sort of thing that he always does. I think Garcia went on to Belgium, if I remember rightly. But Martinez, who obviously we are far more interested in, ended up returning even more to his roots and became a part of the national setup as a goalkeeper coach. So he went from being an assistant manager for all of these different clubs to bringing it back to goalkeeping. And he joined the under-19 Spanish setup in 2023. So helped with the Spanish under-19s. And then after a year, made the jump to the under-21s. And then was a under-21s goalkeeper coach for Spain from 2023 to 2024. And he did a bit of work for the senior squad from 2024 until August, before going back to the under Spanish under-21s, where, according to a few of the sources I've managed to find, he was still working with the under-21s right up until he joined us. I don't think he's doing both jobs alongside each other. At least that's not been stated anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised, because sometimes they do that. And obviously, we've all got an off-season for the international. So, yeah. He spends about 2-3 years away from Garcia. But other than that, is basically just his assistant for a vast majority of his career so far. Which is like, so I've got a list of things like what this says, because usually this would be the part that I go off and have a look at their weird agents. No idea. I feel like at this point his agent is just Garcia. So what does this say about him as a person? Well, we've got wealths of experience, Greg. As I said, we've been around
vast quantities, right? Well-travelled.
Extremely well-travelled. That's both good and bad, because he's had some really, really good seasons. He was at Watford when they got promoted. He's had some really bad seasons. 4 months at Olympiacos, not even a month in France in his first spell. Importantly, he also helped win promotion without Garcia, and he was an assistant manager at that point. So he knows the championship. He's been in the championship twice. He's tasted both victory with Watford and defeat with Brighton. Especially, 6-2 aggregate loss to Derby. It's got to bite a little bit. He's also loyal almost to a fault, but then also showed that he was able to step out on his own and has started to step out and doing his own thing now. And also, importantly, he's made strides in the national squad. It's always good when we've got international experience. I think that's always helpful when you've got football from different perspectives. We've already seen that with Trollope being sort of in the Welsh setup, is we're starting to build a wealth of players and coaches that have had both international and club playing experiences across the breadth of Europe.
Not just that, though, youth as well, right? Being part of youth setups is going to be a huge part of the role. And look, I think that it feels good. It's great to have that much experience. Nobody's going to go through a career without ups and downs. I don't think you can read too much into it. How much of that can be attributed to his fault as assistant manager? Who knows? Frankly, let's be honest. I mean, it's hard to put any value on that unless you're actively a part of the setup. But it's a head of experience to bring into the coaching team, and in the same respect, you don't know in our setup how useful a goalkeeping coach is. Whether that means he's also part of the the wider coaching group for the tactical discussions and whatever. It's a lot of experience and good work with youth. I mean, Spain's youth are particularly good, right? Off the top of my head, that something looked like dings a bell with no factual backing up. But,
well, you're gonna have like Barca and Real Madrid's academies, right? So, I think that's one of the key things for me is also remember he's not being brought in as an assistant manager. He is being brought in as a goalkeeper coach. He just happens to have all of this experience. So the fact that we're going to be working with younger players is a bonus. The fact that he's worked with younger players on an international level means he's worked with good younger players, which is good. There is a level of experience and age there that can help Will still. You've got an experienced back room that, if he needs the advice of other coaches, you've got extremely well-travelled assistant, you've got a now recently retired player, you've got the stability in Cole Martin of somebody that's been at Southampton forever, and now you've also got an older coach who's been there, done it all, and will also hopefully try and teach shot stopping to Bazunu.
we can only hope.
So where I'm at is I think it's actually a really good signing, and considering it was fascinating to me. I didn't realize sort of how big this guy's career was. You kind of just hear like coach, and realizing he was an assistant to quite a prominent manager. I knew of Garcia from his short period of Watford. I remember like the news story about him being ill. Like, I don't know why I remember that. And obviously just Troy Deeney having his absolute like amazing season at that point, right? So I kind of knew about it, but it's the fact that he's also been in the Championship before. So if what we're worried about is Will Still's lack of Championship experience, we've now got a bunch of guys around him who know what that's like. So yeah, I just think it proves more to me that we are doing better with the hiring than we think we are. And obviously it's quite easy to dismiss lots of the stuff Sports Republic has done. And I understand why, because of last season. However, when you do some digging and some research into it, you're like, they've actually made some quite like good hiring choices here. And, you've got a goalkeeper coach who's worked at an international level and also has done a bunch of stuff all around the world with various different clubs. So yeah, I think it was far more information than I expected to get out of all of this research, and it took me significantly longer than some of the other episodes just trying to dig out all the information. So fascinating, and I hope that it just means that we can have some trust in this back room to hopefully put a really decent season together. So
well, wait, look, I'm excited. Look, what a great profile again, Zach. You continue to outdo yourself with the wealth of information you provide. I feel better educated than ever about Saints' backroom team and the system we're going to approach and deal with. It's just building up the excitement, mate. Honestly, I'm so ready for the first day.
Once again, mate, this is the best use that I'm ever going to get out of my history degree.
I appreciate it.
As a software developer, I'm really, really glad I spent 3 years studying, I don't know, Cold War, communist Europe.
I am grateful that you're putting your abilities to a much better use.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that.
Football. One episode. Brilliant. Well done.
Awesome. So once again, thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to probably talk about the kit launch that might or may not be happening. I think we're all pretty under the impression that it's a kit launch, right, Greg? It's gonna be really weird if they pull out a signing.
Mate, there's some potential for some grade A trolling here.
100%, but it'll be either way very exciting. So I think we might be talking about kits. Yeah. If not, who knows? If it's not kit launch day, you're probably gonna get an episode about kits anyway. So just embrace it. But thank you all for listening. I hope I helped to teach you something today about our backroom stuff. Give us a like, give us a comment, all that fun stuff all over on all the socials: Facebook, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, TikTok, all of those things. It's going to be something funny from this episode, hopefully. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I wish you a cooler rest of your week, and we will see you in the next one.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.